Okay, this is aquatic ecology video 3, and we're starting with global water problems, which is slide 51. A lot of this is going to be review from the video, the blue-gold video that we talked about. So this is, they looked at this a little bit where we were damming the rivers, which, helps right around that area where you dam it, but does not help because you have less water going to the ocean. The salinity changes, and then that breeding ground for that whole coastal ecosystem that's so important, there's usually some kind of wetland, gets changed, and then so this is very harmful to the ecology. Drinking water problems, again, that was a lot in the video. If you drink not clean water, it's going to make you sick. Coliform bacteria is one of the big problems. Coliform is a fecal bacteria. It is in poop of us, of animals, of pretty much anything. So there's, believe it or not, set levels that are okay to have in your drinking water. They're saying 0 colonies of this coliform bacteria per 100 milliliters of drinking water. Potentially if you have 1,000 milliliters, you could have a colony of bacteria, not the end of the world, as long as you're within those limits. And then they say 200 colonies for swimming water. So it's okay if you're swimming as long as you're not drinking it. So you see how much we're excreting 2 billion organisms of this coliform bacteria per day. It's really easy that if we don't treat the sewage for it to get, for our water supply to get contaminated. So that's one of the big disease causing right there. The waste that demand oxygen mess up, require all this oxygen. So if there's a whole bunch of waste in the water, if it's polluted, it's using up the oxygen in the water, which means that there aren't or isn't enough oxygen for the fish and the animals, and then we have a die-off. Chemicals, water-soluble chemicals, inorganics, acids, salts, mercury, all of those can dissolve into water. We know that water is a universal solvent. It will dissolve everything, which is usually a good thing, but in this case is a bad thing. If it dissolves all this stuff, we can't drink it. It'll make us sick. The organic material, all of the pollutants, you guys could probably list those off the top of your head, the oil, gas, plastics, pesticides, detergents, all of that's pollutants that get swept into the water. Population growth, we've talked significantly about population growth already. An increasing populations means an increasing need for water, increasing pollution, and increasing need for space, for building, for development, and all of that limits our water supply and messes up, especially the overbuilding, so that water can't seep into the ground, and that messes up the whole water cycle. The video focused a lot about the water wars, so I'm not going to spend too much time on this either. Make sure that you know it and that you're comfortable with it. The water wars, out west, specifically in the U.S., California and Arizona are fighting over the Colorado River. Same thing happening in Texas. And the big question, like I told you at the beginning of the video, the big decision is how do you share water? Who owns it? Who has the right to own it? Does anyone have the right to own it? So water management, right now, we are damming and we are building reservoirs. And you can see that even, looking at this blue gold video, even that's kind of starting to go away because, the benefits, you can harness the power from it, provides water for towns and recreation, so on and so forth. So there are some benefits, but the problems have ended up in the long term, in my opinion, overriding the benefits to it. So yeah, we saw an initial, oh, this is great, let's do this. And then now we see, the effects long term where you're having less water going downstream, you're changing that ecosystem, you're reducing that biodiversity, you're messing up what's going on already, so you need to control and keep most of that water where it's supposed to go. Diverting water, moving, not necessarily damming it, but just moving it to control where the water flows. Again, keeps the water where we want it. Same problem down the road. Destroys those wetlands, destroys the land. Desalination is where we're taking seawater and removing the salt from it to get drinking fresh water. This is not an efficient way to do stuff at this point in time. Uses tons of energy, a lot more expensive, and then we have this whole salt byproduct that we can't figure out what to do with. So the technology is technically there, but it's really in its infancy, and it hasn't really been determined yet whether this is an effective method or not an effective method. Icebergs. Somebody came up with a great idea, oh, let's take an iceberg, to California, to Saudi Arabia, or somewhere that really needs water, look at all the fresh water they'll have. Again, great, we have all this fresh water, but the iceberg is going to be, you start out with a massive iceberg in the Arctic or the Antarctic. As you tow it to these warmer places, it's going to be melting pretty dramatically as you go. That influx of fresh water as you move around raises temperatures, changes the weather, changes the climate, just crazy messes stuff up, changes water currents, which changes the weather. So that just messes with stuff that they didn't think about. And then also the technology to tow something that big is, crazy expensive, not really there yet, but that was one of the ideas. One of the biggest and the most effective, and this sounds really silly, but conservation is one of the biggest methods that we have. Recycling, conserving, fixing leaks, just using less water, taking shorter showers, turning the faucet off in the sink when you're brushing your teeth. All those little things, believe it or not, add up to a huge amount. You saw on the blue gold video, one of the things that really stuck with me is, I can't remember what country it was, maybe Denmark, that their toilets were set up so if it was urine, it's just going to remove the urine, not actually flush the toilet and use water to do that, which is a great way to save ridiculous amounts of water, especially in the U.S. The problem with this thing is that it's just, it's not important to people. They're like, oh, well, I'm really tired, I want a hot shower, and everybody's guilty of it. I'm guilty of it. It's a lack of caring, it's a laziness thing, so it's just that constant reminder and get the word out there that this, this is an important thing. This is something that we need to be doing. So moving into fisheries, this is kind of moving away from the whole water itself as a resource and moving into what's in the water as a resource. Most of the fish stocks worldwide are declining. Some are doing better, some are stable. So it's, it's not the end of the world doom and gloom thing. We're just now starting to see results from some of the conservation measures that have been taken since 1990. So we're just now really seeing a stock stabilizing, or the bycatch has gone down dramatically. That used to be really, really wicked bad. And there are fisheries that are very poor still that have a high bycatch. So the bycatch is the fish or the animals that were not meant to be caught but are caught anyway. So one of the big fisheries that comes to mind with that one is the shrimp fishery, especially down here in the Gulf, has a huge bycatch. They put out these great big nets and they trawl for shrimp, and they catch plenty of shrimp, but they also catch all the other stuff that's on the ocean floor around the shrimp. And so that's a huge bycatch. Like 50 to 75% at least of the animals that are caught as bycatch are dumped back in they're all dumped back in the ocean, but almost 3/4 of them don't survive. So you're really having a huge negative impact on the ecosystem. So they're trying really hard to minimize the bycatch, to design nets and fishing techniques that don't catch anything except the target species that you're looking to catch. So some of the big methods right now, purse seining is one of the big ones, where you set out this whole net, and you can see here the boat right here will set out this whole long line and really make one big circle, and then draw it in like the drawstring on a purse, and pull up that thing here. This is a very small purse seine. This would be more average for a commercial fisherman right now. Huge, huge, huge amounts, thousands and thousands and thousands of pounds in one single catch from these things. Tuna is what's normally caught here. Dolphins are bycatch a lot of the purse seines. There's a big movement. Your tuna is dolphin safe. There's a big movement, and that's gone down. They have these escape mechanisms where the tuna normally are down in deep water and the dolphins are at the surface, so they have these like escape mechanisms where they let the dolphins swim out of the top of the net before they draw it closed on the tuna. So that has gotten significantly better, but it's still not an exact science, not perfect yet. Longline fishing is where you stick literally miles of fishing line into the ocean with thousands of hooks on it. They're left free floating for days at a time, and the boat comes back and picks them up. Again, great for the barracuda and the tuna and the swordfish, all those big species that we want. Not so great for all the bycatch. We get a lot of marine mammal bycatch on this, a lot of sea turtle and birds bycatch on this. This one is one of the, in my opinion, one of the bad ones. But it's out there still. It's legal for some fisheries still. This is actually the method that I used when we were doing the shark conservation, but it had been dramatically altered to ensure that the animals we caught were still alive when we caught them so that we could tag them and release them. So not necessarily doing away with longline fishing, but modifying the technique, perhaps, not as long, not as many baited hooks, or especially not leaving them free floating for days, but going out there and checking the next day or something might make this a more conservative fishery. Drift nets are also really bad. They've almost, I don't want to say eradicated, but they're much less popular now because they are so bad. They just stick a net out there and let it drift around and then go get it. So again, these are really, really big. You can see 34 miles long for a net is just ridiculous. People are inclined to get more and more. The bigger the better, the bigger the catch the better, and it's turned into such a commercial enterprise as opposed to a fisherman going out to collect his catch. It's a company going out to collect a catch, or stuff like that, and it's just very much changed from 100 years ago. And that's the decline in the fisheries, is because the technology is better. We can, rather than catching 10 fish, we can catch 100 fish, and it's just with half the effort. And so it just has changed very dramatically. So now we're starting to see these problems, and we're starting to get stuff under control. One of the biggest tricks or problems with fishing right now is that not every country is adhering to the rules. And really, we don't have the right to set rules for another country. But that's another big argument is, each country owns the ocean up to, I think it's 200 miles offshore, but those rules can get pretty tricky. So let's just say they own the ocean X amount of miles offshore, but there's this whole big center of the ocean that nobody really owns. Who has the right to go and fish in that? Do they have to, how do they control what's taken? So this is up to worldwide organizations to control that. Not all of the countries buy into those worldwide organizations. So this is one of the biggest problems we're having with Japan right now about the whole whaling thing. And we'll talk about that later. But regulation is the key right now. It's not really the fisherman that's going out fishing that is the problem. It's what laws is he required to follow and who's enforcing those laws that should be worked on. And again, that's my personal opinion. And we'll talk about that some more as time